Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, selecting nature's finest. How to choose your best wildlife images post-trip. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Aditya Panda. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you for joining us here today. Take it away, Aditya.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everyone. I hope you've all been doing great. We just wrapped up the India safari season, and I finished my last trip of the season and the last trip of the season on the 18th. So, as Rob was telling me earlier, it's the end of safari season in India now and the beginning of webinar season. So we'll have a lot to tell you about how our season went and all the exciting sightings that we had and all of that over the next few months through our webinars. Before we start with today's webinar, let me reintroduce myself for those of you who are seeing me after a while and for those of you who are watching one of my webinars for the first time. My name is Aditya Panda, and I have been leading NatHab expeditions in India since 2016. I lead what we call our tiger trips, which are the Grand India Wildlife Adventure, India Tiger Quest, and as a photo expedition leader, I lead the India Tiger Safari, now called the India Tiger Photo Expedition. When I'm not leading NatHab expeditions, I involve myself in conservation. I work for the conservation of tiger and elephant landscapes in eastern central India, where I'm based. Now, over to today's webinar. Now watch this video and tell me what you hear. I'm done with my nap. How can you sleep? These are two beautiful tiger cubs in Ranthambore Tiger Reserve being photographed on one of our India Tiger Quest expeditions earlier this season. Now, all you can hear are camera shutters going berserk. In this age of digital photography, when we are not worried about running out of film, we tend to take a lot of pictures. We tend to get trigger happy. And you have to take a lot of pictures because you don't want to miss anything. And wild animals, they're always moving. They can be quite unpredictable in how they behave in the next second. And you don't want to miss anything. They might be quiet and doing nothing one moment, and the very next moment there might be a lot of action. In the film days, when I started photography as a teenager, I started with a fully manual film camera that my uncle had gifted me. And to buy rolls of film, of course, for a teenager on pocket money was expensive. And I started doing wildlife photography, and I would buy 6 rolls of film for a week-long trip. And somehow I managed to get pictures even with that. Now, professional wildlife photographers who used to shoot film, I've actually seen professional wildlife photographers in the film days, having film cameras that could shoot several frames a second. They actually needed an assistant sitting with the carton of films, taking away blank films or empty rolls once they were used, and quickly handing over a fresh roll to the photographer who used to quickly reload them and shoot. Now you can do far more than that with digital cameras these days, and cameras are getting faster, as they evolve from a time when 6 frames a second used to be considered, state of the art, we have now come to a situation where 20 frames a second is almost routine. Especially with mirrorless cameras, you can go even higher. So all of us tend to be a little shutter happy when we are shooting wildlife, and that means we end up getting lots and lots and lots of pictures. Now watch this other video and tell me what you hear.
Ready for the other tiger?
Yes, I am. Now that's more like how I usually shoot. I have learned over the years the art of being economical while shooting wildlife. I wait for the right moments, I anticipate them, and I shoot only when I have to. I still shoot a lot of pictures, but because of years and years of experience, I know exactly what I want. I know when not to shoot, more importantly. But should you be doing that? A lot of photographers advise that. And, even I sometimes advise that to my guests. But you see, I go to these places all the time. I have got, hundreds of thousands of sightings of most of the animals that we see in these places, including rare animals like the tiger and leopard. And, I have still managed to get a pretty large portfolio of pictures. And I will not shoot when I'm not getting something unique or I'm not getting something spectacular. But I can't give that advice to you who might be traveling to India on safari, for the first and last time, or maybe for just a few times. Every frame, every shot, every sighting is something that you might be seeing for the last time in your life. So I wouldn't advise you, especially when you're traveling to far off places, to places that you would not routinely be going to, like India and Africa. I would advise you to do whatever it takes to get the shot. Don't worry about being economical, just get the shot. So shoot away, be shutter happy, get as many pictures as you want. But regardless of being shutter happy or economical, I on a typical nearly 2 week long trip, like say the Grand India Wildlife Adventure, I would come back home with usually about 1,500 to 2,000 pictures. A lot of my guests could get those many pictures on a single game drive. So uh, you come back with tens of thousands of pictures. But regardless, even if I'm shooting economically, I come back with a lot of pictures. And what that means is that no matter how you shoot, you come back with a massive mountain of files. And that becomes a problem. You see, it's exciting to get these pictures. It's exciting to look at those pictures on your camera while you're in the Jeep, while you're back in the lodge or camp, to show those pictures to your friends and co-travelers. But once you get home and once you download those pictures, it can be quite an imposing, intimidating task to go through every one of them and pick out the best. You might have situations where you have 800 pictures of a bear or a tiger just sitting in one position with almost no difference between the first picture and the last. Now, how do you sift through these pictures? How do you pick up the best, and how do you delete the rest? Because I mean, storage is not cheap. You can store on external hard drives, and a lot of people prefer to store their pictures on the cloud as well as on multiple external hard drives. And all of those things cost money. Hard drives are expensive. Cloud storage isn't cheap either. So it becomes important after one point of time as a regular wildlife photographer to be able to cull your pictures and reduce the amount of file storage that you're having to deal with. And today's webinar is going to discuss just how. Now, culling your files is something that can be a little difficult. Apart from just being tedious, because you have to deal with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures, a lot of people just are very reluctant to delete good pictures. Now, if you have 500 pictures of a stationary subject, all 500 of them might be sharp, all 500 of them might be in good light. But do you really need 500? No, you don't. But all 500 might be worth being termed as keepers. But how do you pick and choose from them? That is a fine art that you will develop over time. And I will explain 3 different ways that it can be done. And I'll tell you how I do it personally, how I prefer to do it. Now, the first way to do it is in your camera. Now look at this video here of this beautiful tigress with her cubs. Now notice what I just did. In your camera, you have an option to lock certain pictures. The option is given primarily to avoid accidental deletion. While you're deleting pictures, you don't want to accidentally delete a good picture. That is why all cameras have this option where you can lock certain pictures. And this is something you can do anywhere. Now watch this video again. That there is the lock button on a typical Nikon DSLR. On other cameras, you have other buttons. So this is the simplest and sort of quickest way to do it, because you could do this while you're sitting in the Jeep waiting, just going through your pictures, and you pick the best of the lot and lock them, and then you can delete the remaining pictures, and the camera will not delete the locked pictures. But of course, you can only do that if you delete using the delete button, not if you format your card. If you format your card, everything is going to be erased, including the locked pictures. So choose delete all instead of choosing format card. You could do this in your Jeep while you're sitting, and there are moments when very little is happening and you're sitting and waiting at places. You could do it back at camp. You could do it in bed. You can do it on the long flight home. This is one of the first and easiest steps to cull your pictures and just to keep the keepers and do away with the rest. Another way is to do it in a photo editing app like Lightroom. Now, Lightroom happens to be the most popular, the most common application used by professional photographers or serious amateurs, and it is a great app for post-processing your images. It is also a great app for organizing your catalog, your portfolio, your library, whatever you choose to call it. Now, I understand that the screenshot that you see of Lightroom, of my version of Lightroom, might be different from yours. There's a lot of confusion about it. There are 2 versions of Lightroom. One is called Lightroom Classic, and the other is just regular Lightroom. The only difference between the 2 that is worth keeping in mind is that Lightroom Classic is meant for desktop use. It stores pictures on a hard drive that could either be in your computer or attached to your computer. The other Lightroom, the one that I use, or Lightroom Cloud, can be used on multiple devices, and it uploads pictures to a cloud storage service. So all I need is access to the internet, and I can access my Lightroom library from any device anywhere in the world. I don't need to carry my hard drives with me. Now, when you import pictures into Lightroom and when you're going through them, you can watch this. This is a screen recording. You can either choose to categorize them using a star rating system, or you can also choose a system where you can pick or reject pictures. And then you just apply that filter, you delete all the rejected pictures and just keep the ones you've picked. So for a lot of people, that is their preferred way of cataloging and organizing their Lightroom library. But I personally, call me old-fashioned, but I personally prefer doing it using the Finder app, or if you're using a Windows computer, the file organizing windows that you have. This is how I do it. Now here I open my external hard drive where I downloaded my pictures. I open the folder that contains the pictures, and then I go through my folders. You see, if you use Finder on a MacBook or any Apple device, you can choose this view option where you have the picture shown in a large window with a film strip of the thumbnails running below. Now, what I will do is I will go through these pictures, and I will obviously delete things that are out of focus or shaken or the pretty obvious rejects. But if I find a good picture, what I do is then I open it in Lightroom and import it into Lightroom. And I will leave the folder aside sitting on the hard drive for me to deal with it later. So this way, what I'm doing is that I'm only importing the best of the best into Lightroom. And then later, once I worked on them in Lightroom, within say 5 or 10 similar pictures, I can pick the 1 or 2 or 3 tops and then delete the rest. So there are many ways to do it. Whatever is most convenient to you, whatever is easiest for you is what you can go ahead with. Now there are 5 basic steps to culling pictures. So as I said, regardless of how you do it, whether you do it in camera, whether you do it in Lightroom, or whether you do it on whatever your file management app is called on your computer, there are 5 major steps that you need to take to cut down the thousands of pictures down to the hundreds, and then ideally down to the tens. The first layer of editing, or the first layer of culling, is to find the obvious rejects, things that are shaken, things that are out of focus, things that are not that sharp, pictures that do not have the eye of the animal in focus, for example. You will be able to see the obvious rejects at first glance. So you just choose those and reject those and get those out of the way. And it is amazing by how much you can reduce the number of files, but just by doing that one first step properly. Now, from what pictures remain after that first round of rejects, you can go through the remaining pictures and look for composition. See in a bunch of similar pictures or in a bunch of pictures of the same subject, which ones have the nicest compositions, and just leave them aside. If there are pictures which might be sharp, which might be well in focus, beautifully lit, but badly composed, as often happens. Say if you have an animal walking out of the frame and there is far more space behind it and too little in front of it, then you might not even be able to rescue that picture using cropping later. So pictures like that should ideally go. If you have a beautiful picture of an animal, but the feet or the tail or half the body have been cut off or are outside the frame, you can reject those. If you do that a little meticulously, you will come down to a bunch of pictures that are sharp, that are in focus, that are well lit, and that have decent composition. You might still need to crop a little to fine tune that composition later in post processing, but those pictures are still very much keepers. Now, once you have your keepers with you, you can do some fine picking. You know, if there are 20 pictures of a lion or a tiger, head on with the full face, and you're trying to pick and choose between them, look for things such as catchlight in the eye. The sun moves while we are shooting, and even animals will make some movement while they're sitting. Even if they're sitting still, they might, roll their eyeballs, they might look a little left or right, they might move their faces a little bit. And some of these pictures will have great catchlight in the eye, which means, just light reflecting off the eyeball of that animal, and that makes for very pleasing pictures. So look for catchlight. Look for other things like eye contact. If you have an animal making direct eye contact with the camera, that is a very engaging picture. When you look at that picture, it feels as if the animal is looking at you. So look for things like that. Also look for unique compositions. Is a branch framing the animal? Is the animal sitting in bushes? And in most of the pictures, the leaves are coming, the twigs and leaves are coming in the way. But in just a few pictures, you get a clear window through the twigs and leaves at the animal's face, at the animal's eyes. Look for those pictures and either delete the rest or just store them somewhere else. That will bring down your selection of images drastically. Then you make the final picks. From among those, you start choosing the best of the best. If you have 5 pictures with eye contact and there is mix of eye contact and catchlight, and there are 2 or 3 pictures where you have both eye contact and catchlight. Just as an example, there could be other factors that you could be judging or rating your pictures by, but I'm just using eye contact and catchlight as an example. If you have 2 or 3 pictures that have got both and are clear winners among the rest, just keep those and remove the rest. Now you're down to very few pictures. Now, one thing that I do here is that I ask someone else to have a look at my pictures, because as the photographer, I can be a little too possessive, and I might tend to not be objective when judging my own pictures, because I've taken those pictures. I like all of them. I love the moment when I took those pictures, and each of those pictures is a memory, is a reminder of an exciting sighting. So what I do is I will often ask someone else to just sift through them and tell me which ones they like the best. And I would only do this in the final few pictures. And usually having a second or third eye look at these pictures, that makes it much easier to pick the best of the best. And then you can start working on them. And then you work on those pictures, you print them, you share them, you submit them to a competition, you share them on social media, you do whatever you want with them. But you still have the problem of hundreds and thousands of other pictures still lying in folders on your hard drive. The ones that you were not sure about deleting, the ones that you were just probably too possessive about deleting. Now, what I do is when I have free time, usually during the off season, which now has started in India, I will sit and go through even the oldest of my folders again and again, and I will keep only the best and delete all the rest. Pictures that I know are just taking up space, and pictures that are not going to be an improvement upon the ones that are the clear pics. I will delete them, and I will rename that folder, and as a suffix to the folder name or file name, I'm going to write proofed. you know, just like proofreading when you're editing a piece of literature. I proof my pictures. I just do away with what is not necessary and keep only the best of the best. And those become my archives. So that, in a nutshell, was how I cull my pictures and how I manage my rather intimidating mountain of files at the end of a safari season, because during the season I really don't have time to sit and work, or the energy to sit and work on my pictures. At the end of a trip I might pick 5 or 6 or 10 good pictures and work on them and share it on the NatHab photo share feature on our trip portal, which is something you must really try, or share them on social media, or uh, you know just print them or do whatever. But I really only get to go through my entire years or seasons work only in the off season, because it is tedious, tiring, time-taking work. So that's how I do it. And I hope you found these tips useful, and you will not get intimidated by the number of pictures you have ended up with at the end of a trip, and you will not procrastinate on that. So, as promised, I will be editing some of my favorite pictures from the past season. Well, I'll be honest, the best of the best of the past season, except for the last trip, the best of the best have already been worked upon, and they have already been, picked and processed. So I have chosen some good pictures from the season from different parks that we visit here in India. And I will live post process them now for you. I've chosen 6 pictures. I do not know if we will have time to post process all 6 of them, but we'll do our best. I've chosen 6 pictures with very different conditions. There are pictures in good light. There's one picture in good light, really. I wanted to use pictures that are a little challenging, so that I can help you with your post-processing workflow by telling you and showing you how to deal with challenging light conditions. So here we have, starting from the first one, we have a deer and a tiger in morning mist, backlit in morning mist in Kanha Tiger Reserve. That's a fairly challenging picture to post-process. Next, we have a large male tiger in fairly low light, very high ISO, so pretty grainy and not great with details. Then we have a pair of wire-tailed swallows that are sitting in really good light. So that picture is probably the one we shall post-process first, because that will help us understand the basics of post-processing on Lightroom. And then we have this rhino, which is, again, not in great light, but is sort of side-lit. And then we have a tigress walking in the rain in Ranthambore National Park in composition that is not ideal. And then we have a sloth bear, which is, as you can see, a pretty dark colored animal. It's a black animal, and often shooting animals that are jet black in color can be quite challenging because it's difficult to get detail out of them, and it is easy for the camera to mess up the metering in scenes like that. With pure black and pure white animals, metering can be quite challenging. So I'm going to get us out of this presentation and go into Lightroom, where I have made a separate folder for today's webinar so that I can show you. So here again are the pictures. These are the white-tailed swallows. They are in pretty decent light. Here is the tigress with a sambar deer in the foreground with mist and backlight from a rising sun. This here is the male tiger that I was telling you about, in pretty low light. And here is the rhino, of course. This is the tigress in the rain. You know, there isn't a lot of space in front of her, a lot of negative space, but not so much positive space. And this here is a sloth bear, and I'll tell you how I got the exposure right on that and how I'm going to post-process that. Let's start with these swallows. Now the swallows here are sitting on a stump. There are no distractions, there are no leaves, no branches, nothing coming in the way. There is a beautiful bouquet because you have a distant background, and that makes for a nice soft background. You have absolute focus and sharpness on the swallows, and the light is great. This picture was shot using a Nikon D500 camera with a 200 to 500 f5.6 lens, and it was shot at the 500 millimeter end of the lens at 1/2500 of a second at f5.6 and an ISO of 800. An ISO of 800 in today's day and age is a pretty clean ISO. You don't get a lot of noise in that. Now let's start by first cropping the picture because we need to do something about the composition. The birds are in the center of the frame. When I took this picture, I knew that I would be ending up cropping it. They were not close enough to fill the frame, so I just used the center autofocus point to get absolutely reliable, sharp autofocus. Now, with the stump like that, it would make for a nice vertical frame, I think. You see the aspect ratio now is 3:2, which is pretty much the camera standard. But if I wanted to post this picture on Instagram, I wouldn't be able to fit in a 3:2 aspect ratio. So because Instagram doesn't support that, it only supports 5:4. So I would use a 5:4 aspect ratio because this picture for now would only end up on Instagram. If I print it, I will use the 3:2 aspect ratio. Now, when I turn on the crop function, you see the crop window has these rule of thirds lines that will help me with composition. I will line up the right-hand rule of third line with the leg of the swallow, and that makes for a pretty decent composition. If you use the rule of third lines or the confluences, the intersections of the lines to place important parts of your subject and line it up with that, then it usually makes for a pretty pleasing composition. So here you go. We've cropped the picture. The composition is a lot more pleasing now, with more space here in front of the swallows and very little negative space here that is behind them. It gives the impression that the birds are looking at something, and it makes for a lot more pleasing composition than the original picture, which showed the birds sitting in the center of the frame with negative space all around. So now let's get into post-processing. You see the profile that I've selected here, or the profile that is default on my camera, is camera flat. I don't use camera vivid or portrait or standard or landscape or any of that, because I want to be in control of those things. I want to be able to do those things later in post-processing. I want the camera just to capture the scene as it is and not add any tweaks in camera. Now, a lot of people get confused about what to do first. Should you work on contrast first, or the highlights and shadows first, or exposure first, or should you be fixing white balance and color first? Now, the easy answer to that is that depending on whatever software you're using to process your pictures, just follow the serial order that is there on the software. The algorithms of the software are laid out in a certain order, because if you process your picture in that order, you will get the best results. So here we will start first by working on light, then we will go into the color module, then we will go into details and effects such as texture, clarity, vignetting, sharpening, and then finally into noise removal and optical correction. So let's start with exposure. Now this picture is slightly on the darker side, and despite the fact that I always overexpose a little bit just to get my histogram as much to the right of the histogram as possible. Despite that, this picture is slightly on the underexposed side. So I'm going to increase exposure a little bit to brighten things up just a tad. Maybe let's say 1.3 stops of exposure correction. You see, all the while I'm editing or while I'm post-processing my pictures, I keep an eye on the histogram. I don't want my histogram data to go either beyond the right or the left of the frame, because that means then I'm losing details. And notice these two triangles here. These two triangles will warn you when you're clipping your whites. That's the right triangle. If you clip your bright parts of the picture, that is going to light up. And if you clip the dark parts of your pictures, this one here on the left is going to light up. When I say clip, I mean losing detail. If you tweak your pictures too much, you might lose detail in the bright spots or the dark parts of the picture. So we have increased our exposure, and what that has done is that it has brightened things up a bit. But things might look a little too bright at the moment. We'll fix that later. Let's add some contrast now to get some more color out and some more detail out. Again, the trick with it is to be, is not to be too greedy. There is always the urge to go, if I pull it all the way here to 100, I start losing detail and it doesn't look nice. So let's say contrast of about 63 points here looks nice to me. And now I'm going to go to highlights, which means the bright parts of the pictures. If I pull down you see the bright parts of the picture, like the white here on the swallow's breast and in the background, they are a little blown out. They're a little too bright. The way to control that is to pull down my highlights a bit to get some detail into those parts. And in a lot of pictures, I will end up pulling the highlights actually down all the way to -100. as long as it doesn't look unnatural. Just be careful that while your end result should look vivid and contrasty and colorful and nice, it should not look unnatural. That just doesn't look nice. So next we go to the shadows. Uh, these are swallows. They have a lot of black on them. And if you see the eye here is black and all around it is black. And it's very difficult to see. There's very little detail there that you can see right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the shadows a bit to sort of open that up to add some detail to the black bits of the pictures, the dark bits of the picture. And finally, now we will fine tune the whites and blacks. We will add as much white as we can, or we will pull down the white slider as much to the right as we can without clipping any whites. If I start clipping whites, you see Lightroom starts to give me these warning red blotches. So I will go back and I will add just about that much. Now there's a lot of contrast, a lot of detail in the whites, but no details have been lost. Nothing is over done. And similarly, we will pull down the blacks to add some contrast to the black parts of the picture. And there, now we have done the light adjustment pretty well. Now let me give you a before and after. That's what it looked like. And just after correcting the light, this is what it looks like now. Next, we move on to white balance. Now, white balance can be tricky. I, by default, on my cameras, just leave the white balance on auto. Now, if you're a studio photographer, you would be fine-tuning your white balance right at the beginning. You would be using something known as a gray card to get the white balance just right in the beginning. But out in the wilderness, we don't have that luxury. We shoot in whatever light there is, in whatever conditions we are in. So I leave the white balance on auto, and most cameras will do a good job of getting it right, or more or less right. I still let Lightroom have a second opinion on that. Sometimes I will like it, sometimes I will not. And right now I'm not liking it. I prefer how it was shot. That looks more natural. Now I will do the next bit of white balance fine tuning, which is to do it using this eyedropper tool. How I do that is I will first temporarily pull up my vibrance and saturation to maximum, and then I'll pick up the eyedropper tool here, and I will choose a spot on the picture that is supposed to look white, and I will click there, and that will allow Lightroom to get the select the adjust the white balance accordingly. Now I'm going to reset the vibrance and saturation back to default values and see how I like the picture. Pretty good. It looks a little warmer than what auto had chosen, but it looks pretty good. And if you notice one more thing as I zoom in here, these bits here, actually show lost shadows. Now, with a subject as small as a swallow, that shouldn't make much of a difference. But I still like to be very picky there. And I'm going to reduce my blacks a bit till I get some detail in those shadows. So there, about there, looks fine. Now you have absolute detail in the whitest whites of the picture and the blackest blacks as well. So a picture that is full of detail. Now, regardless of whether I'm processing a picture for social media or printing, by default, I like to make sure that the file, the end result, should be good enough for a print. So that every picture, even if it is only to be posted on Instagram, is processed just to its best potential and not beyond. Nothing is overdone. Nothing looks, gaudy. Anyhow, we have done our white patterns. Now let's move to vibrance. Vibrance adds localized saturation to the areas of the picture which might be undersaturated. It doesn't act on the entire frame, it only acts on the undersaturated bits of it. Now, like with saturation and contrast, it is easy to overdo this and therefore very important to avoid the tendency to do that. About 27 points of vibrance looks good to me on this. I'm now going to add just a little bit of saturation to bring some additional pop to this picture. About 7 points looks fine to me. I don't see any necessity for using the color mixers here or color grading because this picture looks absolutely fine to me the way it is. I could add some texture here, especially on a picture like this with a smooth, creamy background and a subject that stands out. Adding some texture always makes things pop a little bit. I don't need to add clarity because this picture is contrasty enough. I just don't need to unnecessarily do that. I will sometimes add some vignetting just to draw attention to my subject and take the viewer's eyes away from the edges and the corners. It sort of frames the subject and draws your attention to it. So I added about 15 points of vignetting. Now I'm going to add some sharpness. And I have a standard value that I use all the time with my particular lenses. And I always reduce the radius in the sharpening menu to the minimum because that way you get maximum detail. Lightroom, like a lot of other softwares today, has an AI denoising option that works superbly well. Not only does it remove noise from really high ISO pictures, it also makes lower ISO pictures look absolutely smooth. So I use it almost all the time, even with pictures that are shot in low ISO. It not only removes noise, it also brings out details much better using artificial intelligence. But the downside is that it takes a lot of processing power and it takes, a good 3 or 4 or 5 minutes or more sometimes. Usually I will just leave this on and go make a cup of coffee and come back and it will still be doing it. So I'll not do it now here on a live processing webinar because it's going to take up all the time. Next, I'm going to click Remove Chromatic Aberration. Lightroom has a database of almost all lenses in production today, and it every lens, even the sharpest, most expensive lens, has some amount of chromatic aberration due to the refraction of light through it, and Lightroom will automatically compensate for that, and it will also remove the native distortion that every lens comes with, and it will fix that. So there you go. There's the final picture, and let's do another before and after. So this is what we started with, and this is what we have now after post-processing the picture. It almost, the before picture almost looks like a black and white monochrome picture in comparison. So there, I hope you found the workflow interesting and useful. We have time for me to quickly work on one more picture, and I'm going to do that with this sloth bear here because there's an important lesson to learn in this picture. When you are shooting a subject that is absolutely black, or if you're shooting a dark subject against a bright background, this sloth bear, for example, or a black bear in America, or a gorilla in Africa, what you want to do is you really want to overexpose. Because if you let the camera decide the exposure, then it is going to, the bright background is filling up most of the frame, and the camera might expose for that, causing the black subject to look even darker. So you have to overexpose a bit. And similarly, with a pure white subject like a polar bear, you have to underexpose. So here is our sloth bear. This was from my last trip to Ranthambore. It was so close to me that I actually had to zoom out all the way to 70 millimeter, the short end of the lens, to be able to fit it in the frame. This was shot using a D500 Nikon and a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 lens, which is one of my favorite lenses. It was shot at the 70 millimeter end of it, at 1/1000th of a second f2.8, and it was late in the evening, so even at f2.8, the ISO went up to 8000. So that's a pretty high. That ISO is on the higher side for sure. But look at my histogram here. The histogram is almost entirely on to the right of the frame. So that is how you want your picture. You want your histogram on the right, so that in post-processing you can get as much detail out of the picture with minimum noise and distortion. Now, since this picture was overexposed to start with, I am going to start by reducing the exposure a bit here in post-processing. When I am reducing the exposure, let's reduce it by minus 0.70, which is about 2/3 of a stop, and that looks about right. Now you have detail on the bear, yet the background doesn't look blown out. Look, before I reduced the exposure, the background looked pretty blown out. It looked too bright and without detail. But once I reduce the exposure, it looks much better. Let me just check the composition one more time. To start with, this picture has been composed pretty well, but we are going to fine tune that a little bit and get our bear in the rule of third grids there. So yeah, coming back to post-processing the light on this picture, we have reduced the exposure. Let us add some contrast. Again, not too much. It should not look unreal. It should just look good. There. Here it looks nice and contrasty. The black looks dark enough, but not too dark. Let us pull down highlights some more. Not too much, maybe 40 points. I don't really need to pull the shadows up in this picture because there's enough detail in it, but I'll still pull it up by 15 points. You see, when you pull up shadows, you add noise. When you pull down highlights, you remove the perception of noise. So that's very important to keep in mind. Always shoot and process in a way that you do not need to pull shadows up to the extent possible. Now let's fix our whites and blacks to add final bits of contrast to this image. And end up adding a lot of whites. Look how much detail is coming out on the bear. Now I'm beginning to clip the whites a bit. I'll leave it at 50 points. And now I will pull down the blacks without losing detail on the black subject. So I can't pull down the blacks a lot. I will keep an eye on the exposure on the histogram. You see, when I'm pulling down the blacks here below 30, there is a blue patch appearing around the bear's face, showing me that I'm losing detail there. So I will not go down that much. I will leave it at about negative 18 points. White balance again. Auto looks pretty good to me. When you don't have white on a subject, you have to use your own judgment visually to fine tune the white balance. You adjust basically the color temperature. Moving this to the right makes it warmer. Moving this to the left makes it cooler. And similarly here, you adjust the tint. Moving it to the right makes it more towards the cyan or magenta side, and moving it to the left makes it more towards the green side. So let's go back to auto white balance, which look pretty decent on this. I'm going to add some vibrance. Actually, I prefer the white balance as shot, as the camera had decided, a little more on the green side. Now I'll add some vibrance to bring out the colors a bit, and some saturation, not a lot, just a little. Otherwise, see this leaf here is starting to look, it's going to look unreally green if I add more saturation. And some vignetting to draw focus onto our bear. I can add a lot of vignetting here actually, but 34 points is fine. Sharpening, and I'm going to not use denoise here because as I said, it's going to take a lot of time. So there you go. Here we are done with the sloth bear, and let's do a before and after again. So this is what it looked like when we started, and this is what it looks like now. Now, unfortunately, we do not have time to work on the other pictures. I'm sorry I didn't work on a tiger picture today, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show you a shortcut method of processing your picture if you do not want to go through all the effort of going step by step on Lightroom. Lightroom has presets, some really nice presets. You know, they come, there are recommended presets that give you options of subtle, strong, black and white, cool, and various others. And there are premium presets that are also available. Here, we'll use some recommended presets and just see how it looks. This is, you know, a lot easier, especially when you want to process quickly for social media. But while working on the presets, while using the presets, also do keep an eye on the histogram because the presets are fixed. They are not fine-tuned for the individual picture you're working on. They are fixed presets that can be used on a broad number of pictures. So be very careful while using them. You can also use presets and then fine tune on you know, in the processing section here. So yeah, that was a quick live photo session, editing session after our little discussion about you know, how to color your pictures. And now, if you have any questions, I would love to hear them.
All right, thank you, Aditya. Now, before we start
Rob,
in
over
with
to you.
yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Thanks.
Great. So before we start in with the question and answer session, I'd like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in the control panel. So let's get to some of these questions while we can. So some of our guests have been asking about deleting directly from the card and the camera. We've heard that it can corrupt that card when you do that. Is that still the case? Is that a concern with newer cameras or not?
It's not really a concern with newer cameras, and more so with the newer cards. You know, the modern SD cards, especially if you're using a reputed brand like SanDisk or Lexar or Sony, you know, they're pretty safe. Most cameras also have dual card slot options, so you can use one card as a backup just in case. And with the larger, more expensive cards like XQD cards and CF Express cards, you know, they're very, very robust. They're very, very reliable. But just to be safe, you can always use a second card to just have a copy of everything.
Great. Thank you so much. So when we're out there in the field on a safari, is it important that we have a silent mode on our shutter? Is that something that we need to have when we're out there?
Well, it uh, almost doesn't make any difference to the animals, but it does make a difference to the privacy of other tourists who might be in your Jeep or in other Jeeps around you. So it definitely is preferable to use a silent shutter if you have that option. With modern mirrorless cameras, that is an option, but with the older DSLR cameras, that really isn't an option. They because it's physical mirror slapping against the housing, it does make a noise and you can't do anything about it. But if you have the option, use it. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So do you personally ever use the selection tools in Lightroom?
Personally, I do not. I could. Maybe I'm lazy, but I simply use the file manager and that works great for me.
What about the auto adjustments in Lightroom? Do you ever start there and then adjust from there? Or
Well, sometimes when I'm trying to when I'm trying to choose between 5 or 10 pictures, when I'm trying to pick between them, I'll sometimes use the auto adjustment just to see which ones look better after post processing. But auto adjustment is not something that I use to start with and then fine tune. It's just something that I use to check how a picture might look if I'm in a hurry, especially.
so if I'm in the market for a new computer and I use Lightroom a lot, is there one system, PC or Apple, that maybe performs better on?
I've personally found Apple to provide the most flawless software and hardware, interface. I know a lot of people still use Windows. A lot of photographers are used to that system, so they are very comfortable with their Windows desktop setups. It is also probably more affordable to use a Windows setup, but I find Apple to be the best.
Great, thank you for that. So if I wanted to remove unwanted items from a photo or to do some masking, is Lightroom appropriate for that? And is that something maybe you can cover in a webinar?
Oh, I would love to. In fact, it's getting more exciting by the day with every new update of Lightroom. We are getting more and more artificial intelligence enabled masking features. And earlier, photographers used to work on their pictures on Lightroom and then go into Photoshop to remove unwanted objects. Now you don't need to do that anymore. You can do it straight through Lightroom. They have fantastic AI-enabled features that have just come up very recently, in fact. And I would really love to do a webinar on that sometime.
We look forward to that. All right, here's a question. So if two of us, say a husband and wife, go on a trip together and we've both taken a whole bunch of photographs, do you have any tips on how we could cut down two people's photos if we're looking at them all together?
Absolutely. Um, to start with, I would always suggest that the two of you do something different. If both of you are photographers, both of you are shooting stills, then I would recommend that one of you shoot with a long lens and the other shoot with a slightly shorter focal length or even a short focal length lens, so that one of you is getting intimate portraits of the subject while the other is getting the action and the subject in the environment. Animals in their environment make for beautiful pictures and far more interesting pictures, in my opinion, than just close up portraits. Another thing that you can do is, while one of you shoots stills, the other could do video, and cameras these days do such great video. Having said that, when you compile both of your pictures and both of you, you have to sort of cull through them or sift through them. Try and do away with pictures that have exactly the same perspective. And in that case, you probably might have to keep the ones that are taken with a superior camera and a superior lens, because those files will end up having superior quality and make for better prints and better, JPEGs to watch on a screen. So yeah, that would be my advice to people where two people are shooting together.
Great. Thank you, Aditya. What about this? Do you take all your photos in RAW or JPEG? And is there an advantage to one over the other?
Always in RAW. Uh, if you intend to work on your pictures on Lightroom afterwards, if you consider yourself an advanced amateur or higher photographer, then you should always shoot in RAW, because a RAW file carries a lot more detail than a JPEG file. So you have it's kind of like the difference between shooting on slide film and negatives back in the day. Slide films had so much more color and resolution than negatives did. Similarly, with RAW files, you have literally the raw data from the camera, and you can fine tune that exactly the way you want to later in post processing. But with a JPEG file, you're handicapped to start with, because the camera has decided using average algorithms about what the picture should look like, and it has deleted all the unnecessary info, all the info that the camera thinks is unnecessary, and gives you only what it thinks is a good looking picture. So shoot raw.
Great. Thank you, Aditya. We really appreciate all this great information today. Unfortunately, that will be the last question that we do have time for. So I'd like to hand it back to you for some closing comments.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you to our wonderful audience. As always happens, we could only make time for so much live post processing. I will certainly do more photo webinars through the coming weeks and months, and I look forward to having you all soon again. Thank you.
Aditya, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. If you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen or send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.